Welcome. Hello out there in the great, wonderful world. We're talking about the secrets of estimation, or the secret of estimation. I'm not sure if there's one or many, but we'll figure it out as we go. So welcome to the Squirrel Squadron and welcome to my live stream. I'm going to give everybody a minute or so to turn up, I see bunches of folks have magically appeared. Excellent. Sometimes the system takes a while to tell me that you're there. Glad to see you. Also glad if you're here on the recording or if you're here now and you have to go away. This will always be available on all the channels that you're on now. You can just go to them afterwards and see it there. So if you're watching there, by all means, you can't ask any questions here, but you can always participate in other ways. If you don't know who I am or why I'm here, I'm Squirrel. Hi, nice to meet you. I'm a consultant who makes IT teams insanely profitable. And we're the Squirrel Squadron here. And we get together to, as tech and non-tech executives, talking about what's going on in the tech world, what's important, what we should fix, where we have challenges. I was just with a bunch of you in person last week, which was amazing. And it was super to see everybody in person discussing how to help your tech team be more bold. So that's what we do every week. We have live streams, we have live events. We have ones coming up soon on low code, how to build software without writing any code, how to deal with risk, how do you manage it without driving yourself insane, and what do you do about fear when people in your team are fearful, when people outside your team are afraid of you, what do you do when you have fear? How do you address those fears? And I'm hoping to be live in Berlin in June, so if you're anywhere in Central Europe, get in touch, let me know. I'd love to be live with you talking about all kinds of interesting topics and get myself out of the country. What a great idea. Haven't been able to do that for a while. Great. So let's roll up our sleeves and get started on the secret of estimation. I think I made it singular. I'm not sure there's only one secret, but we'll find out. Could you please, in the chat of whatever you're using, I should be able to see it here through the magic of StreamYard. Could you in the chat say who you are? And what's your main question? What brought you here? What challenges do you have with estimation? What are the biggest, most important things for you? If you put that in the chat, we'll have lots of material to go through. If you don't, if there's nothing there, well, hey, this will be a short stream and I'll tell you what I've got prepared, but I'm much better, as you guys know, who are veterans, I'm much better when you fire questions at me and make me think on my feet, or on my behind, which is what I am now because I'm sitting down. Anyway, fire that into the chat, please. I will pick it up as you go. Who you are and what's your question, what's your challenge, what's the thing that brought you here. If you're already wonderful at estimation and you don't have any questions, maybe you could tell me your top tip, but I suspect most of us are here because we're really bad at estimating, and that's what I'm going to try to help with. Let me deal with my first topic, which is using a starship. So many of you may not know this, but NASA builds rocket ships. Well, you know that part, but what you probably don't know is when they build software for their rocket ships, one of the key objectives they have is to go as slowly as possible. And that's in order to be super duper 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 predictable. That's for the very simple reason that if I build a rocket and I want to launch it and I want it to go to Mars, I better launch it at exactly the right time on exactly the right day. I better be super predictable. And if the software is not ready, oh man, I had a client today whose servers ran out of memory. Well, we're really sorry. The servers ran out of memory. We couldn't get done. We're going to get done tomorrow. Now, they're in the printing business, so this didn't kill them. But in a lot of other businesses, such as rocket ships, that would be a fatal catastrophe. So what NASA does is they have software developers who produce 100 lines of code per year, for the whole year. That's their whole total output is 100 lines of code. Now it's 100 lines of really, really good code. And they can be super predictable about what that code is going to do. They know it's not going to suddenly run out of memory. They know it's not going to suddenly have some kind of problem. Most of us don't live in that world. Most of us don't live in the world where we have a deadline that is set by the sun or Mercury or something like that. That's something that we really can't influence. There's no workaround. There's nothing else we can do. The demand for predictability is so high that we can't do anything else. That's rare. Most of us don't live in that world. Most of us live in a world where we wish, instead of rocket ships, we had the Starship Enterprise. And you might notice, not all of you are Star Trek fans, I'm sure, but you probably have some impression that there's some people in a ship and they kind of fly around to different planets. One of the key things that happens all the time on Star Trek, because it's a great dramatic device, is that the ship is headed to planet Betelgeuse, and they're really interested in Betelgeuse, and they're all talking about it, and then say, oh my God, there's a distress call from planet Gamma. we better switch from Betelgeuse and we're going to head to Gamma instead. Now, you can't do that with a rocket. You might notice that if you launch a rocket and it's headed to Mars, you can't just say, oh, sorry, I see an interesting asteroid over there. I'm going to go check it out. Can't do that. Got to stick on the same plan. You're very predictable. You know you're going to get to Mars at this time because the workings of celestial mechanics. Nobody's going to change the laws of gravity. But the problem is you can't change your mind as you go. Most of us live in the starship world, not the rocket world. And so we don't have to be as predictable, as careful, as slow as NASA in order to produce a rocket ship type of outcome. Instead, we can be much more flexible, and it can be much more successful for us to build a starship instead. And what does a starship look like in software terms? So a starship is a process, a system, a mechanism, which involves short steps. So the starship's going to go a little ways, and then it's going to look around. It's going to say, is there something else more interesting that I could do? And then it's going to go a little further, and it's going to look around again. Oh, actually, Ganymede, that's more interesting. I'm headed there. Oh, forget Jupiter. I'm headed over here. And that is the model that is usually much, much more successful for a number of reasons. First of all, you can change your mind. And you might have noticed, since we had things like the pandemic and wars in Ukraine and lots of other unpredictable things, you might have noticed the world keeps changing. And our software needs to change to match that. And if you're in a rocket ship, you can't change. You can't go anyplace else. You say, and many of you probably had engineers say this, we did an estimate. We told you there would be 5 months. So you're going to come along and ask us to do some different thing. Well, now it's going to be 12 months. Oh, now we'll never be finished, right? That's the sort of thing that often breaks down in estimation. And that's because usually the estimates are way too long. If you make the estimates much shorter, the main reason people cite for this is they say, well, gosh, I can estimate better what I'm going to do tomorrow or the next day. And that's true. You can be more accurate. But it's not necessarily the accuracy that I think is most important. It's the flexibility. I can do something different. And when I do something different along the way, I often get much more value. So that's my recommendation to you. If you're having challenges with estimation, consider whether you really have a rocket ship. Are you really in the NASA situation? In which case you have a different type of problem. We should talk about that. Stick it in the chat. But most of you, I think almost all of you, are going to be in the situation where a starship would be great. I know where I am at any point. I can always shift. I can always change to where I want to go. And I know the next small iteration, the next small piece that I'm going to go. I know about how long that's going to take. And then I'm going to take another view. And we can talk a lot more about how that works and what you do with it. But let me turn to questions. And we got lots of people here. This is fantastic. So let's see. We've got, some people are saying Facebook and YouTube and other exciting things. More people on YouTube. Who knows? Should we estimate? How do we make it easy? Definitely going to cover that. We've got a few more questions. Story points. Now, I've got to cover story points. No question mark. I've got to come to that one. Let me do that one to start with because it's related strongly to this rocket ship versus starship analogy that I'm talking about. So thanks, Mark, for a great question. The problem with these questions, I got to figure out how to do this. I got to get my head above it so you're not looking at not only my nose, but also you can see the question. How's that? Okay, I'm being my own cameraman here. Anyway, the point is that story points are a fantastic invention that has been completely subverted, used in a lot of in a way that's not very productive. What I mean is it was invented by starship drivers, by people who were captains of starships, who were saying, gosh, what we'd really like to know is how we could predict where the starship will be next week. That was the kind of level they were looking at. If you go back and check out the early Scrum material, or especially extreme programming, you'll see people talking about story points, estimations, a concept called yesterday's weather, where you look at what you did last week and you say, well, this week is probably going to be like last week. Just like if you want to know what today's weather is going to be, look at yesterday's weather. It's probably similar. There's a good chance it might not be, but that's a good way to get a pretty good fast read on what tomorrow is going to be like. So if we know we did so many story points last week, maybe we'll do about the same number of story points this week. That's all they were trying to predict. And that's why you have these notions that people get very confused about, where the idea is that a story point isn't linked to a certain number of hours or a certain number of days. It kind of evolves within the team. A team may have a certain number of story points at one point, and then as the team composition changes, the situation changes, their velocity, their number of story points changes. These are concepts that come from that starship world, and they're solving the problem of where's the ship going to be next week, not how it's going to be in months and months and months. We're not building a rocket ship. We're interested in where could we shift. Hey, wait a minute. It takes us about this many light years, this many hours to go this many light years or whatever with our warp drive. and this one's that many light years away. I don't think we can change to that one, but we could change to this one. How about that? That's the kind of decision that story points were designed to solve. The problem is people keep using them as if they were useful for project management of the type that you need if you're building a rocket ship. And what they do is they say, okay, great, now I'm going to very carefully measure exactly what my number of story points is. I'm going to define them very closely. They're going to be linked to the number of hours that I'm spending. Every team will have the same amount. I'll be able to build a big chart, and I'll be able to see exactly how many points there are for something 6 months down the road. And if it takes 6 months and 1 day, I'm going to adjust my story point definition so I get it more exactly. This is nuts. This is the rocket ship problem. And if you have this problem, it's a legitimate problem. It's just not one that story points help you to solve. So I'm frustrated with the misuse of story points. And I really wish they would be used as they naturally and properly should be, namely to measure kind of what was happening yesterday, what was happening last week, what was happening last sprint. What's our basic estimate of what that is? And we don't have to be that accurate, and we don't have to be that precise about it. We're not trying to make an estimate of exactly how many hours something's going to take. We're trying to see, hey, can we visit that asteroid? No, we can't. We can't fit that in because last time we tried that, it messed us up. It took too long. So we're going to keep going to the planet we were headed to. That's the way that story points really should be used. Mark, I hope that's helpful. Feel free to ask more about that. That was a great question. Let me see what else we have. I'm just going to try to grab these. Story points versus cycle time, which is preferred? Oh, Mark, you got great questions here, but I'll give somebody else a chance. Gap between dev and business. I definitely agree, Emma. I'm going to try to get to all of these, but you guys are blasting in wonderful questions here. This is very good. I'm going to try to pick ones. Great. Here's one about unknowns. So Jyoti, I hope I'm saying your name right. Your question is about, do you add unknowns when giving estimates? I'd say I don't when I'm in Starship mode. Because the notion here, if we go back to this idea of yesterday's weather, is that you should be able, with some level of accuracy appropriate to your situation, that is one in which you don't have a desperate deadline, you're not locked into a certain time as you are in the rocket ship model. What you should be able to say is, well, look, last time various unknowns happened. Oh, yeah, Laura was ill on Thursday, and George was really had trouble with an out-of-memory issue on his computer, and, a few things went wrong last time. And so we kind of thought last time we'd do 20 story points, and we actually did 18. So should we predict 20 this time, or should we predict 18? Well, something will go wrong. That's the unknowns. So our best shot is to predict for this sprint that we'll do 18 story points. And something may happen that would be good. We get something's easier than we thought, and we might actually this time get 22 done. Fantastic. Next time we could predict 22 and see how we do. But we're not going to predict 40. We're not going to predict 8. We're going to be kind of on the right planet. We're going to be in the right area to get the right answer. So Jyoti, other than in the rocket ship situation, I don't advocate adding a specific amount for unknowns or trying to predict the unknowns, trying to understand what they are. Let's reduce all the risks. Those kind of things are usually pretty unpredictable, but in the aggregate, they're reasonably predictable. In other words, something's going to go wrong. It'll be kind of like what happened last time. And so we'll be close enough for the purpose of getting the task done, getting to the outcome that we want, if we come up with a measurement based on what happened last time. So Jyoti, I hope that's helpful. That's how I look at it. I would love more questions about that. Good stuff. Let's see, what else do we have? Great comment from Tom. I had not heard this, but Tom, I'm now going to quote this everywhere. Ron Jeffrey says, story points are arguably the worst thing I created in my career. I don't agree with Ron, and I hope Tom doesn't either, because I think they're tremendously useful used correctly. And they really tell you about a specific team, what its performance was like recently, and how you can predict what might be coming next. The problem is, unfortunately, as Ron has discovered, it can be massively misused. So I use them. I think they're great. I don't object when people use them correctly. So fantastic comment there, Tom. Fantastic. Jyoti says, thank you. Excellent. All right. Let me see if I can go back through. You guys have amazing questions here. I'm going to see if I can go back through and grab some of these. And I'll just keep going with questions. If we do all questions, that'll be super. I've got more stuff, but I'd rather answer for you. Let's see. Adam asks, let's see. Is that a question? Giving the business what it needs in terms of predictability. Adam, that's a fantastic topic. Not quite a question, but let me suggest what you might do about that. First of all, you have to find out what they actually need. And I would use the starship and rocket ship analogy. I found that very helpful with non-technical people, many of whom are here, of course. But if you're a CTO, you might go and say, well, look, are we really in a rocket ship situation? You've told me there's this hard deadline. We really need it by this date. Can you tell me why? What bad thing will happen? Will Mars not be there? If really Mars is not going to be there, or the regulator will put us out of business if we're not done by that date, or something like that, we have a different style of problem, and there's a different need for predictability. Probably you're going to get less done, just like NASA does less, right? They reduce the number of lines of code they write to a ridiculously low level to be super predictable. Maybe you need to do that, but find out what the business need is really first. And then, of course, often when you describe it in these terms, they'll say, well, yeah, actually, I like flexibility a lot. You guys just don't seem to be able to do it. And the discussion I often have then is, yeah, the reason we're not doing it is you keep pressing us to be super predictable. So this trade-off is an important one. I've written about it, and I call it the tilted slider. And happy to talk more about that if that's interesting. But Adam, my first step here would be find out what the business really does need and press on it. Don't let them just say, yeah, we just need you to be predictable. Why can't you just do everything, right on time the way we want you to? Ask them why. Ask them what the business value is and what would come from it. Very happy to say more about that if that would be useful. Let's see, what else do we have? Julianne has asked a long question, so I have to sit up for this one. Ideas on how to get engineers and developers to be more open, to give more insightful estimations that can become more predictable. Fascinating. So Julianne, I'd ask you, and feel free to put a comment in about this, why are they not being open? The typical reason for this, as I say, I'm doing a session on this in a few weeks, is that they're fearful. Something bad has happened to them. And so they say, well, I better be protective. I better be cautious. I've got a client who has done, let's see, they do a design document, a high-level design, a low-level design, and then they start their grooming process. They haven't even started writing code, but it's been months and months, and they've produced like thick volumes of paper. We used to do this in the 1990s. I thought we had learned not to. But the reason for that is sheer fear. They've been pounded and pounded for missing deadlines. And so they say, well, what I'm going to do, I'm going to be just like NASA. I'm going to be as super cautious as I can, get a whole lot less done. I'm going to have really accurate estimates, which turn out actually not to be that accurate because all those documents tend to get out of date very quickly. But they're trying to tighten down and get real control, usually out of fear. So my guess is that you have some fear there, but we'd have to understand more about what the fear is and then how to mitigate it. Very happy to talk more about that. If you have some insight, feel free to put it in, and we'll come back to that question. Let's see, who else do we have? Emma has a question about she's struggling with estimations despite introducing processes. Well, Emma, I've worked with before, and you have a fantastic business there, Emma, with fantastic education, the educational purpose, and I'm really pleased you're pounding away on it. My general recommendation, you remember this from when we're working together, the processes are not the place to start. It's alignment with the people. So, I had someone who was considering my services, and he decided not to work with me. He decided not to use me for consulting, and I was glad because he said, well, what I really want to do is I want to get the process exactly right. Then I'll figure out the people. Then I'll have the people kind of fit into the process. I said, I think you're nuts. That's not the way that these things improve. So I know that's much more challenging, and they probably have more questions about how to do that. But the thing I would be looking for is exactly what you point to, the gap between the dev team and the business. There's a gap there. Let's solve that gap. Now, that's much harder, but if we were able to solve it, then the processes tend to follow naturally from that. So I'm not going to, unless you guys really press me, I'm not going to say a lot about, have this process and your grooming should be 7 hours long and it should be on every Thursday when the moon is full. That's not the kind of thing that I think is most interesting or helpful to you. Things like, are we in a rocket ship or a starship, and how can we make our starship more flexible? Those are the kinds of questions that I think you could align on between the dev team and the business, and that might help you. So Emma, ask more questions about that. Boy, this is really active. You guys have got tons of great questions. Super stuff. Let's see. Lina says, how to estimate in a productive way, or have productive estimation sessions that don't feel like a waste of time for the engineering team. Man, I have been in more estimation sessions that were more of a waste of time, and everybody was bored, right? They're all sitting there, studying their phones or studying their fingernails or whatever it is they might be doing. And one person might be arguing with somebody else over exactly how many lines of code something's going to be. Are we going to build it with Kubernetes or with Docker? and they're having some discussion. I'm a front-end engineer. I'm sat over here saying, why on earth am I hearing all of this? So I don't know if that's your situation, Lina, but that's a pretty common one. I also hope I'm saying your name right. If it's Lina or something else, correct me. I hope I'm saying it right. But your question is a really good one. How do you avoid this feeling of non-productivity that you often get from estimates? And my suggestion there would be look for the motivation behind the estimates. It's kind of similar to the answer I was giving, I think, to Adam, which is you got to understand where is the business coming from? Why do people need these estimates? What benefit are they going to give us? And that'll often lead you to a couple of things. One, as I was saying to Emma, might lead you to process changes. So you do the process differently because the business is going to be behaving differently. You are understanding them in a different way. And so that might lead you to say, well, look, we only need the backend team for this part, because actually what we need to do is make sure that we have all the right servers in place. We have all the right infrastructure. The business wants to reduce the cost. That's the benefit. And if we can predict the cost, actually, they don't care about the time. And for that, we don't really need the front-end people. We just need to know which servers and which place and how we hook them up. So front-end people go away, and then they won't be bored. Now, that's a silly and simple example, but that's the sort of thing that if you understand what the purpose is, what is the benefit to the business of the estimates that you're making, that can often help you enormously in making sure that you have the right people in the room. And then how to help them not be bored, how to help them find that it's a productive estimation where they come out and say, yeah, that was really useful. I now understand what to do better. That would be about aligning the outcomes with what the inputs are, with what you're asking them to do. And I happen to know a little bit about your situation because I'm working with Perlego at the moment. So I know that you guys are making some radical changes, which I'm very proud of you for making. And those should really help you to align what the business wants with what you're doing, and to make sure that you're doing the kind of experiments and learning that are exactly in the Starship model. So I'm happy to say more about that, but those are my two strategies for your situation. I hope I've understood it correctly. Again, ask me more questions. Great stuff. All right. Goodness gracious. You guys are very active. This is super. I love all the questions. Keep them coming. Let's see. So Catalin has an answer for Julianne. I'm going to let Julianne answer that, discuss it. Let's see. Mark asks a specific one. I'm going to let others go first, Mark, but I haven't forgotten you. I'll come back. Let's see. Okay. Oh, Adina has a great one. It actually goes over several comments. Adina, I'm just going to try to summarize yours here because there's a bunch. Your estimations are really bad. Okay, great. We could all have an Alcoholics Anonymous moment. Hi, my name is Adina, and I make bad estimates. Okay, good. My name is Squirrel. I make bad estimates. That is perfectly normal. And maybe if I'm going to say the overall secret of estimation, it's accepting that they're bad and then working around it. And she says, I don't care about finishing the test on Jira. I'm trying to prioritize bottlenecks, and don't skip things that are needed. So it sounds like, Adina, you're doing your own prioritization, which suggests to me there's something that might be broken there. Jira stories have lower priority. I have a bad name of being bad at estimation. In fact, you're doing other stuff. And so what you're estimating is not what you're actually doing. So this sounds like there's a lot of other stuff broken. We should talk more about what's broken and how you could fix it. But if you're working around, if people who are here have people like Adina in your team who are working to do the right thing, but the Jira tickets and the story points and the other things aren't rewarding them, there's something wrong, right? We ought to be doing something about that as executives. So what kinds of things could you do about that? Well, you could try to get the work that Adina is doing onto the board. And I'd suggest, Adina, that you try to get your items onto Jira. I suspect you have access. Normally, you could add a ticket. So why couldn't you add a ticket somewhere? You could even open your own Jira board. Get a separate Atlassian account or wherever you feel like tracking it, and keep track of that work and say, well, this is my real work over here. There's this other work I seem to do, but I only do it occasionally, and my estimates for it are really bad. I admit it. No problem that I do it badly. But my real work's over here, and I'm actually doing very well on it. That would be a rather challenging thing to do. But I think you'd have really productive conversations, also some productive conflict, if you were to point out how there's a difference between what you're actually doing and what you're estimating, because that's not going to get you in a very good situation. I hope that's helpful. I don't know if there was a question in there. It's just an observation, but I thought it was a really interesting one. Good stuff. All right. And we have Simon. I'm just going to keep plowing through these. These are great. I'm having a blast. I hope you're having fun. I certainly am. Is the perceived need for better estimates a hangover from waterfall thinking? What about the no estimates part of the Agile community? I think those people are nuts. So I think that estimates have a very important role to play in an Agile team. And the idea that we can't estimate, deadlines don't match Agile processes, Agile teams don't have deadlines, I think those folks are really missing the point. Maybe there's something valuable that I'm missing. I would love, if there's any advocates of that point of view here, please argue with me in the chat. I would love to hear from you. I'll run a session with you and we can discuss it in person. Would love to do a live stream. Excuse me. Would love to do a live stream debating that point. But given I have a kind of empty chair here, and then Simon's asked the question, I'll say why I think that's not valuable. It's the same as if you were to say to somebody who was driving a car, hey, we don't need reverse. Reverse is not really needed. It's overrated. Cars don't really go in reverse. They don't go very fast in reverse. I mean, why would we use reverse? We're just going to go forward all the time. And we should make the rest of the world conform to how we want to drive our cars. We want to drive them forward because reverse, it's slow, it's annoying. You can't really see back there. You have to use the camera. You know, it's a pain. And we're not very good at it here in our cars. So we're going to drive without reverse. The problem is reverse is really, really useful. And it really does help you used correctly. Driving down the motorway at 70 miles an hour, don't switch into reverse. Your transmission will fall out of your car or something, whatever happens. I'm not good with cars. But the problem is that reverse is really, really important when you're parking, for example. And reverse is really, really useful when you've gone the wrong way and you need to go back the other way. In the same way, estimates are a tool. They're a thing that we can use and that can often tell us really useful information like, hey, we better tell the customer not to expect one of these two features, and we better give them the choice of which one we're actually going to do. Because if we do the right one that's most valuable, they'll pay us more. And if we don't, then they might fire us. That seems like a place where an estimate would be really useful. Accuracy of the estimate is not so important there. That's a perfect case. We've had a couple of questions on this where the kind of the starship model, understanding the story points in their true form, understanding what you were doing last week rather than trying to understand what you'll be doing 6 months from now. That kind of estimate would be tremendously useful for determining which thing you should do next. And I don't see any reason to throw it out of the toolkit. I think the problem is that people say, well, gosh, these are painful. We screw them up a lot. Nobody seems to understand them. We get held to them when they don't actually make sense. We get beaten up all the time. Let's just get rid of them. And I think they're just as benighted as somebody who would say, let's drive cars without reverse. So that's my opinion. Simon, I hope that's helpful. I would love for people to argue with me. Excellent. Tim has written an essay, quite large pieces of work. Is there a better approach, he's asking? Let's see, better than quite large pieces of customer work, need a certain level of estimation so we can set expectations for customers. Big epic later is broken down into stories and re-estimated by the engineers. Well, that's certainly going to go wrong, Tim. I'm not surprised that you're having challenges if that's what you're trying to do. So the skill that I'd suggest you're missing there, or rather more the habit, actually find that engineers are very good at this skill. It just hasn't been unlocked for them. Nobody said, can you try to do it this way? The skill is as soon as the customer work comes in, break it into meaningful pieces, which you can do in the Starship way, right? Let's do a little bit and let's decide if we want to go a different way. And then we'll do another little bit and another little bit. And I think if you asked your engineers, they would actually be better at that than you think. It tends to be there's a mental block stopping them. And they say, oh, gosh, Tim couldn't possibly mean that he wants me to do it this way. Tim really means he wants me to be accurate 3 months down the road. So I won't try to build it in this way. That might take 4 or 5 months total, but that would give me lots of interaction points with the customer along the way. Once you convince them that you really do mean it, actually, they don't find it that hard. And if they are finding it hard to do that, I have a challenge on my website, which I'm happy to repeat here. And the challenge is, it's a bet. If you can bring me a feature, a task, a thing that someone needs to do, and let me talk to you about it for a little while. And if at the end of that conversation, if I have not figured out a way for you to make progress on that, on the Starship model, little steps, being able to adjust your plan at each stage, giving real customer value so you can get the actual feedback, maybe even payment from the customer at each stage. If I can't do that, I will buy you a beer. I have never bought anybody a beer as a result of this bet. I have won it every time anyone has taken me up on it. You can take me up on it here if you like. So that's something I could definitely help with if you're interested. Let's see. More from other folks who haven't commented. Let's see, and I'll go back to people who've asked questions before, but I just want to get everyone a chance. Kat has a suggestion about a book to read. So there's a suggestion. I don't know that particular one, but the title sounds great. It sounds straight out of rocket ships and starships. So that would be really useful. Good stuff. Let's see if I have any other new questions. Then Seb says, I have a terrible analogy. Okay, fine. Seb obviously knows much more about cars than I do. That's no problem. Anthony says he'd like to join. I'm not sure what he wants to join, but if you're having trouble joining, Anthony, let me know. You're obviously able to chat, so I'm not quite sure what you mean. And let's see. Merrick says, doesn't agree 100% on Simon. Most important is the estimation session is very good for getting people in the room to actually understand what they're up to. Very, very good point. I'm glad you said that, Merrick. That session provides very good natural place for having this discussion, exploring possible ways of how to do things and getting people aligned, regardless of estimates. And that's another reason why I would say, let's not get rid of estimates. Let's not get rid of the whole process because it has so much value in lots of ways that are unexpected. It creates exactly this discussion, can create a lot of alignment, can create a lot of options. Hey, did you guys know, actually, we already have part of that feature. We could build it tomorrow by turning it on for you. Would you prefer that we did that instead of building a whole new thing the way that you asked for? That's the sort of thing I hear over and over again from engineering teams once they start thinking in this way and become more aligned with the business. You get much more value from it that way. Seb says that estimates are not the same as reverse. Okay, fine. Well, Seb, go ahead and tell me why. I'm very happy to discuss that further. My point is simply, of course, not that estimates are involving going backwards in some way. That's, of course, not what I mean. If that's what I was confusing you with, I simply meant that there's something useful that cars have. And they're sometimes kind of inconvenient to use and they go wrong and it's kind of annoying to use reverse, but that we shouldn't make a car that doesn't have a reverse gear. In the same way, I wouldn't make a team that doesn't have estimates or doesn't use estimates simply because it can be misused or they're difficult to use. That was my only point. If that's not clear, argue with me. I would love for you guys to disagree with me. I'm going to move on to a different topic, to another tool that might be helpful. And then I'm going to come back to questions and I'll try to get back to some of the ones I skipped over before. I'm trying to make sure everybody gets a chance to be in. These are fantastic questions, by the way. And I just want to mention another method that I've used, which is another means of transportation. Today's my transportation day for whatever reason. We've got cars, we've got rocket ships, and now we're going to have airplanes. So I have a client who has a tremendously difficult to manage project. They've been managing it for a long time. It's really not been going the way they'd like it to, and we're trying to get control over it. And I said, well, the first thing we have to do after we kind of stabilize it a little bit is to make sure that we have good feedback on where we are. And then we're going to understand how bad our estimates are, because they're going to be bad. Let's just plan for these to be bad estimates, just as we anointed Adina before as the charter member of the Bad Estimation Club. I'm happy to put my hand up as a member as well. And I said, we're going to have bad estimates on this project as we try to get it done. But let's try to understand how bad and what we're going to do to mitigate it. So this is the same folks who had a difficulty with being out of memory earlier today. They were just dealing with this problem very, very well, I thought. And they used the method that I call the glide path. And so the first question for all of you is whether or not you have ever landed an airplane. Put your hand up if you have, and I will not put my hand up because I've never landed a real airplane, but I have landed lots of flight simulators, and so I've got a sense for what sort of the instruments are in front of a pilot, although you would not want to be in a plane that I was going to land. That would not be a good idea. But on a simulator and on a real plane, you have a little thing that's a circle like this, and it has a line down the middle that can move up and down. It also moves left to right, but let's not worry about that. Just worry about the up and down. And it's called the glide path indicator. And it shows you, as you're coming in to land on a runway, whether you are on the path that is the normal path to land on that runway. So, for example, if you're way up high up here and you're planning to land by suddenly coming down, that's not the normal glide path, right? That would probably hurt everybody on the plane, not break up the plane. Or similarly, if you're going to come in really low and just kind of slide onto the runway, that's not the normal path. Normal path is come along at a nice smooth angle, to move down a little bit toward the end, to stall just as you land and then to land. And the glide path indicator knows all this. And so it says, well, I'm predicting that I'm going to be here. And gosh, you seem to be a little bit high. So you notice the glide path indicator is high, and you push the control column in and you go down. I hope I got this the right way around. And you start angling downward and heading more toward the path where you'd want to be. Or the indicator will get low. It'll be a little bit below where you want to be. And say, oh man, I got to pull up. I'm going to miss the runway. I'm going to be too short. Land before the runway. I better pull back, and then I'm going to move up and get myself on the path. The point is, the experience is, for any of you who did raise your hand or who've had experience in flight simulators, is you're never on the glide path. So this indicator is it's almost never right in the middle. It's always a little high and a little low and a little high and a little low. And so what the estimates help you to do is they're sort of the glide path. They're the place you'd like to be. And the glide path indicator is your status mechanism, your way of reporting, hey, we're a little bit behind. And here's what we're doing. We're pushing the control column forward. We're changing this. We're increasing the flaps. We're decreasing them. We're adding scope to our project. We've discovered a new bug that we need to get done. So we're deleting something else that we were going to do. We're using a manual workaround. These guys were out considering whether they should buy more memory, pay Amazon more in order to run with additional memory in their servers. You're considering all those things, which you're going to do in response to your glide path indicator. So what I'm suggesting that you do is you use your estimates in this more productive way to inform what your glide path is telling you and where you are against it, and have a mechanism by which you know at some regular intervals, every week, every day, whatever makes the most sense for you, am I above the path, am I below? And expect not to be right. That's the main message here. If the overall secret is your estimates are bad, it's the message here is you can make use of your bad estimates, and they can tell you, I'm a little high, I'm a little low, I'm too much here, too much there, I have too much scope, I have too little, I don't have enough information, I need to go see my customer. Whatever those actions are, your bad estimates are telling you what you can do in order to bring yourself closer to the path you want to be on, but you're never going to be on it. So I hope that idea is helpful. It certainly has been to some of my clients. What else do we have? Let's see. We have a question from LinkedIn user. I don't always get everybody's name. Is there any point in story points? One novel suggestion I heard this week is to break all stories down so they are the same size, i.e. less than 5 points, and then don't bother pointing anymore. Instead, just use flow metrics. Well, LinkedIn user, whoever that is, glad to hear from you. Sounds like a very interesting idea. I haven't tried that one specifically. The problem that I'd see with that is that it's going to be quite difficult to get all the stories to really be the same size. And I'm not sure what business value you're creating by doing that. You are simplifying the process quite a lot. And if your situation is one in which many things can easily be broken into small pieces, if you have e-commerce would be a good example of that. Is often you can do a lot of experiments with the high traffic you have. You can do a lot of, you can get away with a lot of things that you can't in different in situations that have greater demand for quality. And so you can cut a few corners and actually kind of keep things to the same size. I think it might work in those situations. This is very interesting. If you try it, I'd sure love to hear about it. This is the sort of thing, by the way, that we talk about on the Squirrel Squadron forum. So LinkedIn user, whoever you might be, if you're on the forum, tell us your experiences. I'd love to hear if you try that and how it works out for you. Okay, great. Seb is in here ready to argue with me. This sounds like fun. Reverse is a capability that a car needs. Oh, I can put it up there, can't I? Reverse is a capability that a car needs to maneuver. Estimates are not required to deliver software. Claiming that they are analysis is disingenuous. Okay, well, great, Seb. We may be agreeing to disagree here. I'm not quite sure. Reverse is a capability the car needs to maneuver. Estimates are not required. I guess I'd agree with you that it is physically possible to run a team without estimates, but I haven't seen very many be successful. So, and I think there are cars that don't have reverse. So do Formula One cars have reverse? I don't think they do. I don't remember, but yeah, you're certainly going to know more about cars than me, but it certainly seems to me that you could build a car without reverse, and you certainly could run a team without estimates. No question. I won't argue with you there. I think they're a really useful tool, though. And I think there's a good reason that lots of cars have reverse, and I think there's a good reason that lots of people use estimates. So I'm not trying to be disingenuous. I don't mind your disagreement, but we might agree to disagree on that one. I don't mind that either. Let's see. Seb also suggests something called Lunar Logic Story Point Pack. That sounds fascinating. I'll put it up there in case people are interested. Not something I know, but it seems very interesting. Also related to the other question about story size. Maybe it's the same question, not sure. Right. Simon remarks, this sounds like Kanban to me. So this is a good point. So Kanban, for those who don't know, is a process that's a bit different than Scrum. Scrum seems to be taking over the world for a reason I'm not quite sure about. Very similar, but involves little or no grooming and backlog management and so on. The team kind of operates a continuous sprint. They're working at all times. They're releasing very frequently, usually, and they're working from a backlog which is kind of continuously popping up. You often think of it as like a stack of plates in a cafeteria, and you might stick a new plate on top, and then whoever comes along, they're going to take that plate, or you might put a plate on the bottom, and then it will gradually make its way up. And that's the way the backlog works. They just keep taking the thing off the top of the stack. And if you want to play around with the stack and change what's there, you can. They also work to try to keep their work in progress low, so they don't have so many things happening at once, which helps them be more efficient. So that's a brief summary of what Kanban is. Certainly a Starship model is quite compatible with a Kanban process, but I've seen plenty of companies use Scrum or extreme programming or lots of other processes to operate in that way. And I've seen people use Scrum and Kanban and the others to do something that seems an awful lot like a rocket ship to me. Also a good thing, but tends to be different than what people are aiming for with those processes. Hope that's helpful, Simon. That's my view. Very interested in yours. Things can always be split. Boy, Seb is just full of interesting links. I'm going to put up another one from him. The guide to splitting user stories. I've seen several of these. I don't know this one specifically, but if you're having trouble doing the splitting, Seb's backing my point here. We're agreeing on this one for sure. I'm always challenging teams. Can you split it? And actually, they find it much easier than they think they will. And it's Alex Henry. Excellent. He's going to try it and tell me how it goes. That's very good to know, Alex. Super duper. All right. So this time's flying by. You guys are asking super questions, which I really enjoy. I'm going to try to go back a little bit and get to questions that I skipped over before and make sure I cover them. So give me a moment while I go back. Should we estimate? I think we've talked about that. I have my view. I'm not sure my friend Seb agrees with me, that I like disagreement. We covered that one. What else? Story points versus cycle time, which is preferred? Okay, so that's a really interesting one. I'm going to stick that up. So cycle time, I define anyway, as the time between when you decide you're going to work on something and the time when a real customer can try it out. It doesn't mean that you've, it's the first, it comes into your brain, you're thinking this would be an interesting idea. That's not the start point. And the end point is not when the feature's totally done and everybody's using it and you're making $1 zillion from it. So it's narrower than that. But the question is, once I'm ready to do something, how long does it take me to get it out? And I don't see that as opposed to story points at all. Maybe there's some understanding you have, Mark, that I don't. Feel free to tell me. But I see cycle time as a measurement, a thing that you might report on. It might be part of your glide path. Hey, actually, we're getting a good cycle time now. We're kind of on the path. Oh, wait a minute, our cycle time has really gone up. It's really slower. Something is wrong. We're off the path. We need to do something. I could imagine it as a kind of a metric for telling you where you are. But story points is a measurement of what the team is completing and what their estimates are. So maybe you mean velocity. I'm not quite sure. But feel free to ask more about that, Mark. I'm not quite sure I understand it. But thanks for giving me a chance to talk about cycle time, one of my favorite topics. What else do we have? Let's see. I'm not seeing any others that I skipped. Just checking that I don't miss them. Okay, so Jyoti, I think responding to my answer before, I know the team has a lot of unknowns, and while giving estimates, they don't consider those unknowns or distractions. And when I go back to them, ask them to add those in their estimate, I get pushback, saying the unknowns will always be there and we can't bump up the estimate or take less. So Jyoti, what I'd suggest you do is this yesterday's weather method, which seems to be emerging as something I hadn't thought of before. I remembered it as we were talking. And go back and read a book called Extreme Programming Explained. There's actually 2 books by that title by the same author. They're 2 editions, but they're really completely different books. And I'm sorry, I don't remember which has it. They might both have it. But the concept you're looking for is yesterday's weather. And the idea is that instead of asking the engineers to change their estimates, what you do is you change the expected number of story points they might be completing. This is where the story points really do come into their own. They're really useful for this because it's quite a flexible measurement. So for example, if the engineers are saying, well, we think this will take about 5 points, and you say, well, yeah, okay, well, each of you seem to complete about 6 points every sprint before. Yesterday's weather says you'll complete 6. Maybe you can do that one in a really simple one. And the engineer says, no, we can do more. You say, that's all right, don't worry. We're just going to use yesterday's weather, because before, that's what we've done. If we prove we can do more, then in the next sprint after, then we can do more. So that way you don't have to have the debate. And I'm not sure that you're having fun having that discussion, saying increase it, and they're saying, no, I don't want to. There's something going on there. But you might be able just to skip that and to say, well, look, instead of changing the estimates, let's change the size of the bucket, how many points, how many items we're going to try to fit in. And we'll do that based on yesterday's weather, which then automatically takes into account the unknowns. Because, well, actually what we did last week, we estimated in a perfect world, we would have done 8 per developer, but we actually only did 5. Why was that? Oh, it was because so-and-so was ill and this unknown came up and then we ran out of memory and something else. See if that helps you, Jyoti. I'm very happy to answer more as well. Let's see what else we've got. Very great comment by Cat. I think it's Cat rather than Catalan. I'm not quite sure. Cat, I know I've met you, but I'm not remembering perfectly how to say your name. Having alignment and everyone understanding the objective and actually working together is much more important than 18 story points or 20. I have to heartily agree with that one. And that's a case where the story points and the estimates are being misused, I'd say, if you're worrying about that. Let's see. Here we have another question. Fantastic. Hi, Phil. Nice to see you. Any thoughts on best practices for medium-term forecasting? For example, the next 3 months. Just treat it as a collection of sprints or something better. Well, my favorite is the kind of zoom out method, right? So you have very high fidelity for the next sprint. You have a pretty good number of story points, as I was just recommending to Jyoti. You can use yesterday's weather to kind of figure out, well, what's the size of the bucket? What do we expect that we can do? You should have quite a granular view of the next week. But you can also have quite a zoomed out view. I'll often use things like t-shirt sizes. We can do 4 mediums and 3 highs, high complexity items per quarter, say. And so you've given me 7 medium-sized ones. Well, we can probably do those, but if you add another one, probably not going to fit in the quarter. We'll need to remove one. So that's the sort of level at which I might be trying to estimate for 3 months down the road. Now, of course, if you're in the NASA situation, they need to literally predict 2 years from now. Will the rocket be ready exactly when Mars is in the right part of the sky? And there you're going to want to get much tighter and more granular, but you're also going to go a lot slower. So I'm assuming in my answer, Phil, that, and I think this is true if I know where you are, that you're not in the rocket ship, you're in the starship, and therefore treating it not just as a collection of sprints, but as a sort of a macro view, a larger zoomed out view on which you have less precision, but you can use the same kinds of tools. It's not yesterday's weather, it's last quarter's weather that you can use as a measurement at the next level up. If you like, kind of a fractal approach. That's what I tend to do. I hope that's helpful. And Phil asks another follow-on. Businesses do need expectations to be set over the longer term, for example, 12 months. Have you found any technique better than experienced people doing high-level estimates? No, I haven't. So the problem is that those are usually extremely difficult. And I guess I could say there is a better method. It's to go extremely slowly. It's the NASA method. And if you do that, then sure, you can be very precise and very accurate, but you're also going to go glacially slow. And usually business people are not very happy with that. So yeah, as experienced people doing a high-level estimate, doing a t-shirt size, saying, well, roughly this is what we think we can do, and being very bad at it, and admitting they're bad at it, and setting the expectation they're going to be bad at it, but doing their best. That's the best that I have seen. If someone else has a different view, I would love to hear it. Let's see. Jyoti is having trouble getting people to understand. I completely understand that, and I can see why that would be challenging, Jyoti. Happy to answer a question about it if you have one. Geraldine is here. Excellent. Nice to see you, Geraldine. Estimate short range pretty well with teams, but I don't know how to do the rocket ship. How do you estimate a rocket ship? Okay, if you're in the situation where you have a really hard deadline, I've had these with regulators, for example. The rules are going to change. We're going to have GDPR, or I forget what the other ones, they all have crazy acronyms. This new thing is going to come in on March the 1st, 2023. And if we're not in compliance, we're out of business. Well, you kind of got to get that done. And my method there is really just to reduce a lot of the other extraneous items and say, we're going to be very, very focused on this rocket ship outcome, and we're going to be slow. because we need, we're going to be out of business. There'll be no company here, there'll be no organization if we're not done. And therefore we need greater control and we need to tighten. So there I would do things like maybe have longer sprints and have projects that are a little bit longer than I normally would, as well as have greater, actually counterintuitively, more check-ins along the way. So it might be that I say, okay, I'm going to do a project that's really going to take 3 months. I really do need to get it done at that point. But instead of having 2 weekly check-ins, 2 weekly demos or whatever, I'm going to have a check-in every week or even every couple of days so that I can be very, very close on my glide path indicator. Because if it's off by even a little bit, I have a big impact further down and I might be really in trouble. So that's a bigger investment. The team's going to spend more time breaking the feature down, showing their progress, checking on things, addressing the problems that come up. But I'm wanting to reduce risk in that situation. Geraldine, I'm not sure if that's your situation or if I'm helping there. I'd be happy to say more about it. Let's see. Jyoti has another good one, but I'm going to just see if there's anybody else who hasn't asked yet, just to give chances. Boy, Jyoti, you have all kinds of comments. This is tremendous. Seb with more comments. Thank you. Cone of uncertainty from Catalan. I'm very glad you're commenting that. Let's see where else. I'm trying to catch up with where you guys are with all your fantastic questions. Let's see. Okay. So Geraldine's saying, giving a little more context, work with fixed penalty contract RFPs. Okay, that's one of the hardest ones to do. Have you considered e-commerce, Geraldine? Have you considered doing something different? Because that's a very hard world to live in. And if they insist on the rocket ship estimate, then I would increase the cost of producing the estimate. So I hope your customers who are producing those contracts and RFPs, they're paying you for those because you're spending an awful lot of effort on them. And if you're not, I'd consider insisting they pay. So they're paying for the estimate, but then also you're going to be doing the work more slowly and more carefully, and the estimate's going to be higher, and you're going to control scope more carefully. That would be the third part that I would try to get into your contract, that there are inherent unknowns in the thing you're doing. I assume you're building software, so you're building something new that people haven't seen before. That has inherent unknowns. That has inherent risk, and that should be priced in. And it can be priced in by having additional payment. So you can have extra people, extra capacity, extra tools. My friends who are running out of memory might have already bought before, invested in a server with tons of memory, so they'll never run out. That would be the kind of thing that you might do up front with more cash. And the other thing you could do is have a scope negotiation mechanism in your contract. And if you can do that and you say, we're going to launch on this date, but it may be that we do less of this and more of that. Or we do things a way that's simpler but gets you live quicker. I find generally that customers, even those who are trying to lock you into these fixed penalty contracts, actually value the flexibility. When you explain the rocket ship and Starship, they say, yeah, give me a little bit of Starship here. Yeah, actually, I would like to be able to change my mind. And then you hit them with, well, that's going to cost you. Here's what to be involved in doing that. Here's the compromise that you might need to make. We have another from Lina. I'm not going to get to everybody's question, by the way. These are great. I'm really glad to see all the engagement. This is fun. If I don't get to your question, feel free to send it to me. Just look at douglassquirrel.com. You'll find email and phone number and everything else. Happy to look at them. I'll stick them on the forum and we can discuss them more there. So if I've missed your question as I come up to the end here, I'm so sorry about that. Please ask it again on the forum or in another way. Lina asks, how to align time estimates across team members. Often the engineers seem to disagree on the size of a project and how it translates to story points. We're back to the person, I'm sorry, I forget who was saying, we've got these meetings and the engineers get disengaged and bored and it's frustrating and, it's not much fun for them. That's probably because a couple of them are butting heads and arguing and having these kinds of debates, which I never like and don't let go on very long. So, and there was another question earlier, I think it was Jyoti again, asking what happens when there's a senior person and a junior person, which do you believe? One may be more optimistic than the other. I think, Lina, you might be hitting this as well. So the first thing is you're going to have much less disagreement if the timeline is shorter. So moving to a Starship type model can be very helpful for just making sure that there's room for debate. So nobody's likely to say if they're working on something very small, well, that's going to take 6 months and somebody else says 6 hours. That's less likely. They might say, well, this will take 6 hours and somebody else says 7. And you say 6.5, we're done, right? Because it just doesn't matter that much. They're going to be less wiggle room, less room for disagreement, and you can often resolve it by splitting the difference or something else good enough for progress. If you're stuck with trying to estimate very big things and you have disagreements, then you probably have a team problem. You have something that's happening between your engineers. They're not closely aligned enough. They haven't had enough trust built up between them. You probably have a people problem there, which we can absolutely talk about. The sorts of things I'd want to do is give them lots of practice at doing smaller versions so that they can get very good at aligning if you really do need estimates on large pieces of work, which are harder to kind of declare finished and say, look, this is what it's going to be, guys, let's go. And if you're in that situation, that's quite an unfortunate one. I'd want to try to avoid that if I could. Great. More questions. Very welcome on that. Good, excellent ones from all of you. Thank you. Let's see what else we've got. Tim says he really needs to get some help and advice at Hyper-Exponential. Well, you know where to find me, Tim. So very happy to provide that. Let's see. Oh, and Mark has more tools. Mark, I think you've had like tons of links. So has Seb. These are very valuable. I'm going to go read some of these because I'm learning, which is the most fun. I'm having a blast and I'm learning. That's the only thing that matters. Well, I care that you guys do too, but if I'm having fun, then I'm sure you will be. Mark says the cycle time scatter plot uses the cycle times of all tasks completed within a specific time frame to give you a probabilistic task completion forecast. I can't say I'm a fan. I'm interested, but I think this is trying to apply a rocket ship model to a starship situation. This is a rocket ship solution. You're trying to get more accurate estimates. And if you take nothing else away from this, it's that actually your estimates are going to be bad, and that's okay. And they can still be very informative if they are bad. So my feeling on this, having heard it for the first time, is you're trying for accuracy in a very, very noisy environment where that noise is going to cloud any signal that you're going to get from this. So I can't see how this is going to help. But if you've used it and it's really useful, that'd be great to have contrary opinions. Let's see. Lina says they don't argue with each other. It's more that they are confused. I think it's more about aligning on what one story point translates to in terms of time or effort. And Lina, let me just suggest a different way of thinking about that. Don't try to tie story points to time or effort. Just tie them to story points. Now, this feels very weird and counterintuitive when you first work with it. But then if you start using yesterday's weather, what you wind up with is, well, we kind of know what we estimated last time. And this one is at least half again as big as that one. It's 1.5 times as big. So it should take us about 1.5 times as long. And that means if we did 12 story points last time, we only have room for 3 of these because these are harder by about 50%. You tend to have less kind of useless debate and confusion among developers when they think that way, because it makes it clear you're not trying to get precision. You're not trying to produce an accurate estimate. You're trying to, sorry to pick on Mark, but not trying to do a scatter plot. You're trying to get a sense for, is this much harder or that much harder, or is it actually easier than what we did before? And last time it took us this long. So this time it should take us this much more or this much less. So I'd encourage you to try to use story points in those terms and look up early material on story points. My favorite, as I say, is Extreme Programming Explained. I'll put that here in the chat so everybody can see it. Extreme Programming Explained by Beck. And I'll stick that up on the screen as soon as it actually appears. There we go. So yeah, try having a look at that. Very old work, refer to stuff we don't do anymore, more than 20 years old these days. But the sections on yesterday's weathers, whatever he has that story points, I think he calls it something else, but it comes out to this thing. I think it's called the story game or something like that. Comes out to the same sort of thing where we're trying to take these bad estimates, use them in a productive way, and give ourselves a guide to where we are. Fantastic. Thanks, Lina. Glad that's helpful. Well, gosh, everybody, this has been a blast. We're out of time and definitely not out of questions. So please get in touch. And let me suggest the best place where you can find me, which is Squirrel Squadron. .com. You can also go to douglassquirrel.com to find me personally, if like Tim, you want to work with me. But the squadron is always free. I never do an upsell or anything like that. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I just want to give back, and I have a blast doing this. I'm having fun. So if you're interested in having more of these discussions, we have those on the forum, which you can join. We have one of these every week. Next week, I believe, is on more on these kind of estimation type topics and how we do specifications. So happy to have you join me for that one, and keep in touch. I would love to hear more questions, more comments, exactly as vigorous and interested as you guys were today. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it. We'll finish with Catlin's comment because he's had so many interesting ones. I think accurate estimate is an oxymoron. I completely agree with you, at least in the software world, if you're not NASA. Wonderful. Thanks, everybody. Very good to see you today, and keep in touch. Stay warm. Bye now.